Hello, everyone. We are live. Thank you for joining. Thank you for spending the next, uh, I'm going to say, hour with us. Those of you who are with us live, feel free to engage. Feel free to join the conversation. We'd love to hear where you're coming in from, and if you'd like to come on stage at any point, I'll be dropping the link on the LinkedIn chat. Those of you joining here on Instagram, feel free to come on over to LinkedIn if you'd like to participate in this conversation. Uh, Jay, I am so excited. We've called this show Storytelling Journey, and this is part of my transformation. I've made a decision to move my content strategy to be more present, both audible and visual, here on LinkedIn and my other social channels. So, thank you for being a guest speaker. I'm looking forward to a fantastic journey. Why don't you kick us off and introduce yourself to the community?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. And yeah, you can actually see my LinkedIn profile there. Jay Pasqua. I'm from the island of Guam, now living in Alabama, and I'm the storytelling strategist. Back in December, I actually launched my book, The Rules of Engagement in Storytelling. And these are 10 basic rules to be able to tell an effective story. And that can help you with brand building, content creation, and really engagement. And that really started many, many years ago. Man, I several years ago now, when I became a reporter. I was a cub reporter back in the day, back when cable TV was a thing. So that's showing my age, right? But there we are. I was a cable reporter. I was a cub reporter on TV, and did a bunch of amazing things at a very young age. And when I moved out here to Alabama, there really wasn't much in the way of media opportunities. And so I pivoted into the call center business. Now, using business acumen from there, also pairing that with my journalism background, I really wanted to help small businesses and see if they can scale using storytelling as the key to do that. And really, that's where I started. But now I'm seeing that there's so many opportunities to help people tell their stories. You know, the digital landscape is changing so rapidly, especially now that we're in the age of AI, that more and more content creators are just doing phenomenal work that's out there. And so I just want to be there to help them along the way.
Hey, that is fantastic. And you know what? This whole LinkedIn effect is really just everyone bringing their stories to life and just sharing the stories with one another. You and I came across um, and connected over a live event that someone else was hosting. And you know what? I've since participated in other rooms where you've shared some stories. And let me tell you, yeah, you almost brought me to tears. I'm a grown man and I'm saying this on live on a live stream. You almost brought me to tears on that story that you shared about your son and the accident that he got into. But that's for another day, and maybe if you want to bring it up, by all means. But listen, storytelling is we've come to realize the importance. You know, we want to help people, absolutely. And whether it is a professional, a business, a job seeker, someone who's in transition, uh, everyone here needs some support, and there's always someone who will extend a helping hand. And very often, those who extend that helping hand share their stories and their real life examples with one another, and that really was an eye opener for me when I began my pivot. Listen, part of my story includes three layoffs in the last 5 years, and I've had to kind of pick up the pieces and start all over. Oh, maybe not all over. I'm in a better place uh, than I care to talk about. But still, it does add some level of stress, some level of anxiety, some level of uncertainty. And to know that there were people who had just reached out, say, hey, why don't we connect? Let's have a conversation. I can give you some advice. I'll share some real life stories as to, similarities as to what you're going through and living through right now has happened to me. And you might be able to pick something up, learn something. And I, I can't tell you how grateful I am for the community here on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. Americo, I want to tell you, I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you and knowing your background and knowing your story and the conversations we had prior to this. There's definitely I like to use the 80s word synergy.
Yes. Is it 80s or is it 90s? I thought that was
It's
more
the 80s,
90s.
90s. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. I just want to kind of go back to that because a lot of people are using alignment a lot lately. Uh, but really, I think that there is some alignment in what we have gone through, in our careers. When we look at trying to help people pivot and for me, I think what's important is I like to tell stories, right? But one of the things that is truly important is the story that we tell ourselves, right? And so having the mindset to be able to pivot if we need to pivot, no matter the age, whether you're in your 30s, your 40s, as a result of layoffs or anything like that. Here in America, there's a lot going on right now. I'm not going to get into politics, but there's a lot going on right now. And so there's a little bit of, well, maybe a lot of bit of uncertainty. there's, there's a lot of bit of uncertainty out there. But, you know, it as long as you're doing your part, right, to tell your story and tell it effectively, I think that's going to be able to help you stand out from the rest, especially in this digital age, right? If you're working remotely, you're competing with the best of the best all across the country and all across North America these days, right? So we really have to be in sync with ourselves, and we have to have an effective story that's going to reach people. So, and
Yeah,
that's why I really wanted to be able to join you here.
yeah. This is such a powerful conversation, and I know this is going to evolve over time. And we'll focus on personal branding. We'll focus on just a whole bunch of areas. And yes, you and I have had similar, almost like a cookie cutter career. I too, not from Guam, but a small island in the Azores, in the middle of the Atlantic, that some atlases don't even depict. And here I am in Canada, and yes, let's not bring politics into it. But hey, we're walking on eggshells, no differently than you are for all the uncertainty. And with uncertainty comes, my year or my word last year uh, that I kicked off 2024 was resilience. And some people are still, focusing on being resilient with all this volatility and all this change. And their story is about how they sustain resilience, how they maintain resilience, and how they, just create resilience to the environment that they find themselves in. My word this year, and I'm not forgetting about resilience because it's still important to me. My word this year is persistence. So couple that with resilience. Hey, I've been knocked down, but I'm being persistent. I got to get back up. I'm in control of my narrative. If I sit here and wallow in my hardships and what has happened to me, I will go down a path that perhaps many of us have gone, and it becomes a very steep hill to climb and come out of. So just be persistent. Yeah, we can be positive, and many people will say, well, positive thinking only gets you so far when you got bills to pay and a roof to put over your head. But you got to think outside the box, and you got to really lean into your strengths and bring those strengths to these social platforms. I tell myself and I tell the community that I serve that I'm here to help people be seen, heard, and remembered. It's part of the customer experience strategy that I use to help businesses and professionals, and it's no different for helping individuals who may not have a business, who may not have professional goals. I'm still here to lend a hand to help raise awareness of who they are, the personal brand that they have, and help boost that brand and help them be seen, help them be heard, and help them be remembered, because we're always one introduction away from a next breakthrough. And if I can make an introduction that'll help change someone's life and make that part of their story as well as mine, listen, I'd put a feather in my cap and call that a successful attempt to help someone.
Yeah, one of the things that is important when putting yourself out there is taking that first step to put yourself out there, right? A lot of people, like you mentioned, they stay stuck, and that really is a bunch of things, right, that could happen to put you there. And I'll just give you a little bit of my background. You know, um, Way back in 2011, I survived a natural disaster. I survived a tornado. That's not an analogy. That's not symbolism. I literally survived a straight on tornado, and it destroyed the house that I was in and nearly took my life and the life of my kids and family members. But by many blessings, I'm still here and having this conversation. And what I realized from there was I built up really a mindset of tenacity and resilience. And many years later, I started to understand that I needed to pivot, like many people are pivoting to a different career. I needed to pivot away from resilience and tenacity and now start realizing success, right? Because the more we focus on things like resilience and tenacity, I started to understand God, the universe, the ancestors kept giving me more stuff to be resilient and tenacious. It's like, oh man, okay, I get it. I get it. I'm strong. All right. Right. But could you just slow down a bit? Um, and so just changing your mindset, right? Understand that you are resilient, understand that you are tenacious, you've got this far, right? But now how are we moving forward? What are we going to do to take those steps? And 2 years ago, now I just said, we're in the age of AI, right? A prompt can get you content to put on your LinkedIn profile. It could put content anywhere. You could have a speech or a script written for YouTube. And I thought, I'm a storyteller. Now is the most important time to do this, where we can realize that we have the stories within ourselves. We can become creative. And yes, Chat GPT and DeepSeek and all the other things are there. We can use that as a tool to help enhance our creativity, but we got to start with the basics. Once we have our story in line, we can take it out there to the market and we can become successful. Again, taking our mindset from resiliency and tenacity and going really into success and reaching those high points where we're reaching our goals, we're getting that promotion, or we're moving into the next phase of our career, or becoming a consultant or coach, right? So these are the things that truly I think storytelling has a real powerful hold on if we allow it to take hold.
Yeah, it's, it, I'm sitting here listening, and I agree wholeheartedly. Everything that you're saying, um, and I can't erase from my mind how we may not be doppelgangers and look nothing like each other, but man, oh man, our story. Every time you say something new, it's like, wow, that same thing happened to me. Now, I was in two hurricanes. One, I was stranded in Cuba. There was an evacuation order. All flights were leaving, taking tourists out. I was the only tourist on my entire flight for Hurricane Irma. I think that was in 2019. No one picked me up. I was stranded in Cuba. Uh, had to check back into the hotel and hunker down with the staff. Got some hurricane training, got a survival kit, and was told, go sit in your tub, put the mattress over your head, and hope for the best." Right? And we wrote it out. But let me tell you, uh, some of the most humbling experiences, and I share them today with so many people, and I draw them and bring them into my professional life because they resonate, and right, they have a purpose, and sometimes those humbling experiences teach you something, whether it's the importance of life, the priorities that you thought were the right priorities. It just has a it just has there's just something that helps you reprioritize and make that pivot. It's like, all right, here all along I thought XYZ was important, and then there's this life altering experience that's like, wow, okay, maybe it's time to rethink things. The other hurricane wasn't so bad. We were fleeing Ian. I drove down to Florida, and I drove for 24 hours to be in Florida for less than 24 hours. The governor issues an evacuation order, pack everything up, and I was determined. My I was determined to not let this hurricane stop me. It's like, you know what? We're packing up and we're driving and we're going to South Carolina and we're gonna ride this out. Well, get to South Carolina, hurricane takes a turn and rips through Daytona Beach. Get evacuated from South Carolina, and right and but I guess the moral and trying to make the connection is that these are humbling moments and events that teach us things that textbooks can't teach you, right? You got to live through it, and those life lessons that many times we hear growing up as children and adolescents and young adults, our parents sharing their life events with us, and we would just shrug them off and not think everything of it. And then you reach a point in your life like, wow, this sounds a whole lot like mom and dad's story, or this sounds a whole lot like, right? It, for us, it happens at different times of our lives, but it's going to happen. And I'm seeing it happen right now.
Absolutely. So it's funny how you mentioned you were in two storms, right? And before I go a little bit into to my storms, right, I just want to say that as human beings, right, we all experience storms in our life. Now, America and I experience actual natural disasters, um, but as human beings, we, figuratively in in our lives, we have these storms, adversity, struggles that we all deal with, and it's through those times when we're faced with adversity that we really see growth in ourselves. How do we work through some of this struggle, some of this adversity? And, you know, as soon as you hit adulthood, right, you're going to see it. And, I understand that it may be in varying degrees. Like I said, America and I, we really experience natural disasters. But your storm could be, man, I'm dealing with layoffs. Man, I'm dealing with, a lot of my colleagues not being able to help me because they're no longer here. What do I do in my position? Am I going to be able to move forward in this company? Am I going to be able to do what I need to do to put food on the table? Right. And for me, when I hit that moment, I I looked to a couple of things like you, right? You were talking about elders and parents. I came up with a mantra after the tornado to kind of put myself, talking about mindset again, put myself in the proper mindset. And I said to myself, by your faith and your DNA, you've got this. Right? Again, the story you tell yourself is just as important as the story you tell other people. Now, I've since taken, like Americo, right, saying that his story helps and it resonates with other people. Anytime that I was in an interview to propel my career, I said, I survived a tornado. Just listen to that. A tornado stepped to me and I won. You want me on your team, right? See, these are these are the stories you can use to show just how well you can adapt to situations, right? How you can use your mindset in a situation that is really important to you and what you need to do to move forward. Now, I've experienced it. If an insurance company looked at my life and all the natural disasters I've been in, they're going to go, man, this guy's a risk. It's only because of the place that I lived in, right? So Guam, where I'm from, is Typhoon Alley. And so we get typhoons, super typhoons, right? 100-mile-an-hour winds plus, I'm saying plus, right? For over 24 to 48 hours. And I'm on a tiny little speck of dust in the middle of the Western Pacific. I've gone through many in my lifetime. I was 2 years old when I first experienced the very worst natural disaster in Guam's history. All right. Two. And just like you, my parents and I were in a little bathtub in this house that was a wood and tin structure. Right. So these things we can do to help propel ourselves, right? One of them is making sure that we tell ourselves the right story. And then, secondly, using those experiences to tell others the story so it can help you even further in the future. These are two things I think that are really important to help you grow as a person and to help you move forward. And I think when um, when I hear Americo and when he talks with other people, I see the similarities in what we're saying every time we crack the mic. So, and I think that's why I look at you and you're smiling because I see the wheels turning, man. Like, hey, I think there's a lot of alignment here. Go ahead.
There is. I want to pause for a second. I know we've had a great conversation, but I don't want to turn my back on our viewers. We've had so many people who have jumped on, and I want to welcome every one of you. I will be sure to circle back and answer any questions that may have popped up. I know the chat thread has been quite busy and quite active, but wherever you're joining from around the globe, welcome to the storytelling journey with Jay and Americo. This has been a great conversation. If you're open and willing to join us on stage, feel free. I will drop the link once again. Here we are. Feel free. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments, and if I can read fast enough, I will answer them in real time. Uh, you and I both shared something, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about how a story evokes emotion. It's there's so many stories to be told. To your point, some people are in the midst of a layoff and trying to get back into the job market. Others are, you know, at a different stage, different pivot, different circumstances in their life that is requiring them to overcome some form of resistance that whoever is putting in their way. What can you share? And maybe it's something from your book, but in terms of that whole emotion and evoking emotion through storytelling, what can we share with our listeners that might be able to help them?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there's two chapters in the book that I wrote, The Rules of Engagement in Storytelling. So, rule number 4 is do not fear adversity, because adversity will be able to, in a nutshell, would be able to help you grow as a person, like I mentioned, right? And so we covered that a little bit. The seventh rule of engagement is use emotion, right? So incorporate feelings and sentiments into the narrative to reach the audience on a deeper, more empathetic level. And I was just looking at the comments, and I think Michael LeBlanc was um, mentioning that somewhere here. He says, the storms we weather prepare us not only for the future, but give us empathy towards others that are going through their own storms. And just in that interaction alone, really shows the power of storytelling and effective storytelling. I mentioned my storms. He mentioned basically the same thing and is encouraging others to understand it from the standpoint of empathy. Excuse me. And really, that's what it is. People can relate to our stories if we're evoking emotion, if we're using emotions in our story so that we can not just use data, but to really go towards the human condition, right? How can we reach somebody? And that's what I've been seeing when I do my LinkedIn events. For the most part, right, I always look at it from the positive standpoint. If we share our stories in such a positive way, I believe we can reach audiences all across the globe, because if you're from Africa, if you're from Canada, if you're from anywhere in the world, right, it doesn't matter where you're from. As a human being, we know pain, we know love, we know joy, we know compassion, right? We all know human emotions. Now, we may not know the culture, we may not know the religion or politics, but we know human emotion. And that's really the best way that we can relate to each other, right? Humanity shines through in these emotions, shines through in the way that we connect through these emotions. And man, you're so right. Emotions can help really reach the audience that you're trying to really relate to.
Wow, that's deep, Michael. I saw you backstage. I don't know if you uh, came up by accident. If you're wanting to speak, I'll bring you up on stage. Feel free to access the link again. By the time I I, I saw you had fallen off. So if you'd like to come back up, feel free. Um, Now, while we wait for Michael to make that decision or anyone else wanting to join us, let's talk about the positive side of storytelling. So yeah, we talk about emotion, but so many of us think, well, nobody wants to hear my story. I'm I'm just a little grain of sand in this big hourglass filled with millions of grains of sand. And who really wants to hear what I have to say? And I always tell people, listen, uh, understanding your audience is complex. There are people who are further ahead in their life's journey that you look up to, and you look as mentors and you look to learn from them. And guess what? You are following and listening to their story. And no differently, there are people who might be at that same level or behind us in their life's journey who are looking up to us. So rest assured, there is always someone who will be interested in your story, and there will always be someone's story that will interest you, which kind of brings me into the whole piece of showcasing. It's not about pumping your chest and showcasing your story, but you got to take the positive, and this should resonate as it did and continues to for me. Open to work and trying to find clients to scale my business. You got to showcase the things that separates you from those that you're competing with. You need to separate yourself and showcase. And to your point, you used a real life example. Here's why you want to do business with me. Here's why you want me on your team. I survived a tornado, and come hell or high water, if something's happening, I'm there, right? So that's people. I really want to stress the importance of don't be afraid to showcase your skills through storytelling, through content writing. You'd be surprised. Yes, you might not get the engagement you want. Virality is something that no one should really be looking for. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen naturally. If it's going to happen, it'll probably be the one time in your life that it'll happen, and it may not ever happen again. So stop worrying about the what ifs and stop worrying about, you know, overthinking. And listen, I was just as guilty, and there are times where I stop myself in my tracks and say, "All right, dude, you're overthinking this. Just get her done. Just what? If you fall, you pick up the pieces, try to learn from whatever mistakes you made, and when you show up the next time, just bring a better version of yourself."
Absolutely. You know, there was uh, there was a point where I wasn't going to do the show that I normally do on Saturdays, right? And it was the beginning. It was me talking with a bunch of my people at the time, my folks, right? A collective. And I said, I don't know. I don't know. I'm from Guam. I don't know if any of my stories are really going to resonate with other people. I don't really don't know. Right. Well, guess what happened? Somebody in the collective, this is the truth, went and created the event and stuck my name on it as host. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Okay. And that's really how it happened. I was pushed over the edge, literally pushed into doing the story. And I said, okay, well, I'll just do it. Now, it took an external force, right? Literally for somebody to push me into this. And 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 I did it. And the same thing with like the tornado. I think the lesson here is don't wait for an external force like a tornado to pivot you to the career you want. Don't let somebody push you into becoming the storytelling strategist, me, right? and do the live event, right? Take control, right? Take that step. Make sure that you have the steering wheel in your hands. And once you do that, once you realize that you have the steering wheel in your hands, you're going to be driving towards the goal that you want to reach, right? Don't let it be an external force. Let it be an internal one. And I think that's the that's the thing I learned was like, I have it within me to do the thing that I need to do. I don't need external forces because at the end of the day, I pushed that button to go live. I picked myself up with the help of other people out of literally a mess. And now I'm here, right? These are the things based in a story that can help you move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And being in control, I think a lot of us sell ourselves short. Being in control of our narrative is is something we underestimate. Like if you know, there was a post yesterday that I was engaging with that kind of touched on that whole narrative piece. At I'm in full control when things go bad. Yeah, I can wallow as we come across posts where everyone is upset or has an opinion of a decision that was made that may have cost them their job, a decision that was made politically that has people thinking uh, otherwise as to what's happening. But hey, we can't let the decisions of others dictate our emotions and dictate our narrative. You got to be able to understand, listen to what's going on, and make the best decision for yourself. Stop thinking about what other people are going to think. Stop thinking about, you know, what ifs. It is important for us to, step away from letting others, and whether it's other ideas, ideologies, rent space in our heads. We are in full control of this. And you know what? I know that in coming episodes, we'll have plenty to share from work examples and community members who may have questions that want our thoughts and suggestions as to how to handle it. Listen, we want to hear your stories. This isn't exclusively the Jay and Americo show. This is a an environment where all are welcome. Come up on stage, share your thoughts. I'm sure there are stories that you can um, bestow us with that will really give us pleasure in listening to and teach us things that perhaps we wouldn't have known otherwise. Listen, I think we're two immigrants who came along to North America with our parents, so we didn't have much choice at the age that we were here with. And if given the choice, I probably would have changed my narrative some time ago. But listen, I now have deep roots here that I just can't pick up and go. Uh, so I plan on writing out my story and writing out my journey as best as I can. And regardless of what's going on around us, listen, my job is to boost awareness, help others. I'm now I've bought into this whole giving mindset because I didn't realize how giving this community was. And I've had close friends and family who have offered help, and when I was in need of it, they were nowhere to be found. Yet there are members here who knew nothing of me, knew very little of my existence, who have helped me tremendously. And I look up to them and respect them uh, with 100%. You know, the integrity that they bring and the advice that they've shared is I can't say that will ever be forgotten. And the examples and the stories that they share, it really, it's been an emotional roller coaster, and I had no idea that this was alive and well and so vibrant in this community.
Absolutely. Um, I was part of a collective a couple of years ago, and I'm still part of a collective, right? There's a community of people out there that really want to be able to help other people, right? And when you're part of a community that's like that, it tends to be reciprocal, right? And you can look at it in all types of different ways, but uh, it goes, it really goes back to a really old adage and something I learned as a kid. And and you can look at it from the positive sense or you can look at it from the negative sense, but what goes around comes around. What goes around
Oh,
comes around.
absolutely. Hey, karma works in mysterious ways. Some believe in it, some don't believe in it. But I have seen karma on both sides of the definition of karma. I've been dealt some karma, and I've seen others uh, eat a little bit of humble pie because of karma.
Oh man, absolutely. Mike has joined
This
it,
is
but before we get to Mike, I want to kind of just go back a little bit. I My mom and dad actually came here before I did. They moved to Washington State, and I was by that time I was an adult, right? And they asked if I wanted to come along or if I could stay, whatever I wanted to do, stay in the house I grew up in, and you know contribute to the household there. What did I want to do? And I man, I wouldn't come here, and if I did, I would be kicking and screaming. But later on in my adulthood, I met a woman, and that's usually how things happen, right? So um, we're now married, but she wanted to come here to be close to family, and I'm here in Alabama, and so whatever our stories, whatever our paths, though, right? Whether it was because we met the love of our lives or because, our parents wanted better in life and they wanted to go somewhere where they thought they could find a better life for themselves, whatever it is, right? It's, we're part of this narrative that leads us to where we're supposed to be. And if we start looking at it that way, right? Again, have that steering wheel in hand, right? Now that we are adults and we're moving in the directions that we see ourselves moving in, make sure that we have full control of that steering wheel, right? What is it? 3 and 10? I don't I forget, it's been so long, right? It's automatic these days, right? But really using the analogy, having both hands on the steering wheel, we're going to be able to get there a lot safer and a lot quicker because we know what we're doing, right? We're looking at the speedometer, we're looking at our gas, we're making sure we got everything going, and we've got the GPS, right? That GPS is your story, is your narrative, your experiences, the things that will guide you throughout your life. And if you keep that in mind, you're going to be headed in the right direction. Just a way to look at things.
Ex- Excellent. Well said. Mike, thank you so much for uh, joining us on stage. The stage is yours. What would you like to share, my friend?
I had a couple questions and maybe a comment or two. A question: how do you read the audience? And I guess it really depends on where you're telling your story. But um, well, let's pick two environments. One is would be on stage. I'm assuming you already have kind of a presentation or a story that you've already picked out. Um, so when you're telling the story, what happens if you get heckled and or interrupted? How do you handle that?
Ooh, can I take that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
So it depends. It depends on the type of storytelling. I'll give you a prime example. So as a storyteller, I use voice characters in my storytelling sometimes, right? So I embody a persona and use that voice character to tell a story, right? And there have been several times where I've actually had that experience. Somebody heckled me in the crowd, and I it threw me off for half a second because the gentleman was a professor. Now he's an art professor, so I'm thinking, man, he's gonna have some sense of decorum. He decides he's gonna heckle me, and the persona I had was an older woman of the culture, right? My culture, and he's of the same culture, and there he was heckling. Now, staying in character as this older woman, I chastise him in character. And it blew him away so much so it silenced him. And it really got him to think about what he was doing because he was now engaging with the character and not me. So there's different things that you could do. Now that's a character, and that's one situation. There was also another time I I was espousing some views that people did not like, and I was talking about it in a poem, right? And instead of really going in on the individual and calling that person out, I kept going with my poetry and doing it in such a way that it was actually going towards what the person was saying in the crowd in direct opposition of what that person was saying. So there's ways that you can handle it without actually directing your attention towards them, because ultimately what ends up happening is the direction of or the attention of the crowd or the audience is going to go to them and not you. And so you can handle it in two ways, right? You can do it direct, right? Address it directly and do it in such a way that it's going to keep the attention on you, or do it the other way where you do it outside and you're not actually directing it at the person. You just continue with your presentation or with what you're trying to say. So you have, but you as the presenter, you have to know when that's appropriate. And if you see that other people in the crowd are actually going along with you and what you're doing, then you know that it's going to end well for you because the attention still remains with you and people are actually now moving towards your side of what it is that you're trying to present. I hope that answers your question.
I think it did. I never really been heckled, but I think sometimes, like sometimes I'll just redirect, like if it's a question, either that's, it's going to be covered later in my story or my presentation, then I'll just say, hey, can you hold off? And then, maybe at the end, if I haven't answered, or, if you haven't gotten the response you're looking for, then we can cover it then or something like that. So then you get through your presentation, then you can handle it. Oftentimes it's either handled or they've backed off. I did wonder though, because typically when someone is heckling or whatever, a very wise friend of mine once said, Mike, the issue is very rarely the issue, meaning that they're presenting or they're acting out of something. So have you ever taken like the time, and I know it's hard depending on the group, and maybe a smaller group you could do it in as opposed to a larger presentation, but have you ever tried to take the time even briefly and maybe even just ask them, what's can you maybe explain where this is coming from or what, why, not that you're interrupting, but what's going on type of thing? Have you ever tried that?
So this was, and a lot of this, the things I've done has been in a performance. So there was a time when I was in a performance in a play, and I was one of the main characters in this play. And the scene is a, a gentleman who's in a concentration camp stumbles onto a cave where other captives have just been massacred. And I'm the character, and I'm supposed to now emote. I'm supposed to draw from my feelings about what I've just encountered and then go to the script. Now, the script was a conversation with God, and it was about questioning why this is happening. And that ended up in becoming a really emotional scene in the way that I presented it. I fell to my knees and I prayed and I questioned God, existence of man, all of those things that people think about in situations so traumatic. And I did this presentation in front of a crowd of, again, artists. And one of the artists, an abstract painter, as a matter of fact, he stood up and he started just like yelling at me and getting upset, and he walked off during the middle of my soliloquy, and I was just wondering what was going on. And because he was a friend of mine, I said, you know what, let me talk to him, let me find out why he's so upset. And the crowd literally watched him storm off in the middle of me. I'm in full-blown tears, right, bawling my eyes out because I'm really into the scene and really getting in touch with my emotion about what's going on. And here he goes walking off. So at the end of it, I go to him and I say, hey man, what's going on? Why are you so upset at me? You know, I did this because I want people to learn more about our history and about our culture, and looking at all the things that even the dark side of our history. And he said, no, you know, when I talked to my elders, they really never talked about it like that. They never cried and boo-hooed like that. They're strong, they're resilient. And what you did, that was Hollywood. And I was like, oh, wow. He thinks this is Hollywood. I'm like overacting. I said, man, I've seen my grandmother, and I get choked up. I've seen my grandmother go to tears because of her experience. And so I tried to convey that to him. And the only other thing I could think of was to meet him where he was. And this is how I did it. He's an abstract painter. I said, you know what? Picasso painted this painting. I'm going deep now. Hope stay with me. He painted a painting for the World's Fair. Everybody in the world was going to be there showing their innovations, their creativity, all the gadgets, the new technology that was available at that time. And he was going to paint this. He was commissioned to paint this mural. And right at the same time that this was going on, Germany basically did one of the very first blitzkriegs in the history of the country. And they targeted a civilian village, right? And Picasso decided he was going to paint this mural now and call it I think it was the carnage at Guernica. And it was really a grotesque mural. Even today, it looks kind of, man, it's off-putting, right? And so detractors were like, and haters really hated the mural, and people who weren't haters became haters because he painted this thing. We're at a World's Fair. It's innovative. It's great. And now you're painting this grotesque scene. What's wrong with you? But he took the time out to do this, to bring attention to the atrocity and the trauma that occurred. And once I shared that story, his eyes like lit up, and he said, well, you did exactly what you were meant to do. You really got me. You stirred something in me. And now that you shared this story, because I'm an abstract painter, you're talking about Picasso. Okay, I get it. I get it.
That's what we as artists are supposed to invoke. It's not really our art, so to speak, as much as it is the feelings and it's the view of the beholder that really is, and that interaction, right? I mean, obviously we're trying to convey something, but from a story perspective, all of our stories are different. My story doesn't look exactly like your story, although there can be, and this is where I was trying to get at the empathy. I'll get that in a second. But I think we shouldn't be trying to compare our story with other people. And the other thing that I've found of late is that I was suffering. I won't go into why, but I was suffering from imposter syndrome, and part of it was this idea that there was a bunch of things that I had failed to achieve, or at least so I thought. And I looked back in retrospect and I said, no, yes, I would have liked to have achieved more, but there was actually a lot of items in the W column that I hadn't really properly assessed. And so, like much of life, we're going to have our wins and we're going to have our losses. But I think when we come to framing the story, we need to understand, and as much as possible, because people mostly want to hear the success stories. And to your point, though, yes, there's time to share maybe some of our worst moments. And again, I think if you can show the worst moment and then maybe how you got out of that or came back from it. But anyway, that's and last but not least, I just share. I believe that life happens for us, not to us. And if we can grasp that and then build that story of how it's happened for us, most of the time in retrospect, because a lot of times we don't get to see it when we're going through it. But if we can tell a story from the point of view of it happening for us, I think we'll have more fun, and B, I think we'll maybe get our message across better. So that's all I had.
That is fantastic. Thanks for sharing, Mike. Um, we are at the top of the hour, and I am sure we'd all love to stay and continue this conversation, but in respect of everyone's time, I'd like to thank everyone who spent a part or the entire part of the show. If you're listening to the replay, feel free to continue engaging with comments, and we'll be responding and engaging with responses. Our objective is to show up and be live every other Thursday. I know I had run into a scheduling conflict, and Jay was kind enough to help me out. So our next live episode will be on Tuesday, February the 25th, and then thereafter we will get back into the uh, alternating Thursday sequence. Listen, this was a great kickoff, great inaugural show, great conversation, and a great engagement in the live chat. I'm excited to dig in and jump in and thank each and every one of you personally and answer any questions that were left. Now, I do have, and I'm going to leave it for another time. I had a QR code I was going to share, and this is the whole customer experience guru in me. I wanted I typically share a short survey just to hear from our audience as to what they liked, what they'd like to see us bring up in future episodes. I won't share that with you, but if you're open to sharing feedback, send me a DM, send Jay a DM. If we're not connected and our profiles align and resonate, feel free to connect with me. I'm always open to growing and nurturing my community as well as helping others engaging actively in their communities where I believe I can bring value. Jay, I want to thank you for not only agreeing to doing this with me, but actually sticking it out for the entire hour. You didn't drop out of the call, which tells me that we're aligned. Why don't you close it off for us and stick around backstage once we shut the room down. I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, I wrote the book, The Rules of Engagement in Storytelling, really for the people out there who don't think that they have a story to tell. And as we mentioned at many points in the conversation today, you do have a story to tell. And it's just a matter of you taking the step towards that. Now, telling your story and taking control of your story are two different things. Your narrative. What is your narrative? I think if there's a question I want to leave the audience with this evening, I think that's the question I'd want for you to consider. What is your narrative? Where do you want to go? Where have you been? Right? And if I can help you in any way, absolutely DM me. You know, I'm on LinkedIn. You saw my profile, and but I also have a website, ruleyourstory.com. You can reach me there as well. Would love to have a conversation with you and learn about your story. So rule your story. I always end it with that. Thanks, Americo. Hey, thanks, Mike, for joining us on stage too.
Fantastic. So, on that note, I want to wish everyone a wonderful rest of your day, wherever you may find yourself, and look forward to having everyone back on the 25th for another episode of the storytelling journey. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.